Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, EnCase Forensic 8, a SANS Analyst Program Review, sponsored by OpenText. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Jake Williams, SANS Analyst, Senior SANS Instructor, and Course Author, and Harp Thukral, Manager of Product Management for Guidance. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Jake.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. So as mentioned, I'm Jake Williams, SANS Analyst and Instructor, and Harp Thukral, Manager of Product Management at OpenText, will also be on with us to discuss the review today, as well as kind of what we saw in the software, and also speak to obviously some stuff we can't, which is, again, where are they going from here. So first thing that I'll hit here is that, I've been an EnCase user for years, on again, off again EnCase user. I'll be honest that when I got the review for version 8, I was kind of it was an interesting thing to say the least. If you went through the 6 to 7 transition, you I'm sure know where I'm going here. I got to be honest, version 8 blew me out of the water, and it's one of those where I have to step back and say, if you haven't seen version 8, you really haven't seen it really at all here. It's back up. Take a look at EnCase from a fresh light. Because the development roadmap has clearly started to change a little bit. I'm really seeing some features added there that were obviously analyst driven, and I'll talk about some of those in the highlight today, or sorry, in the presentation today. There's also a more featured, fully featured white paper that'll be linked off of the webcast reg page as well. But again, some of the stuff I want to talk about today, direct network preview, I thought was pretty interesting. I like the mobile acquisition and analysis, and that's been there, a little bit previously, but really has expanded quite a bit in the new version 8. Pathways has to be my favorite feature, bar none, that's been added here recently. EnScripts and App Central we'll talk about, and then something that I was also really really a fan of was entropy analysis, and I'll walk through all these and kind of why I liked these individual features. Of course, Tharp's going to talk about some other product roadmap stuff, and again, as I mentioned before, there's a full review paper, full review white paper that covers all this and then some on the SANS portal, and again, it'll be linked off the webcast reg page. So look, right off the bat, I mentioned 6, 7, all that history there. Look, realistically, version 8 has all the best usability features of version 6 and 7. It's really rolled into an easy to use interface. I mean, it's one of those spots where everything most everything that I liked in 6 is there. The advances that we saw, some of the code page handling in 7 are also there. One of my big killer features here are the true multi-monitor support. I absolutely love this. EnCase now allows me to go basically detach a pane, drag that pane off onto a different preview pane, off onto a different monitor. I know that folks have kind of kludged together some multi-monitor support in the past, extended out across, basically try and expand across multiple monitors there, stretching your resolution out. But this is actual full modal window multi-monitor support, which is just huge for me. Workflow management's big too. For those that know me, I'm big on people, process, technology. And there's a big piece on making sure that your technology is driving with your processes. The fact that workflow management is now built in is really, really slick. I'm a big fan of this, more so than I thought. I'll be honest, as we talk about pathways, when they introduced me to this feature, I was kind of meh. As I got into it a little bit more, it's one of those things that took me a minute to realize that it had been missing, kind of thing. So I say missing so much that it's one of those. I'll talk more about it as we go. It's really, really slick here. The mobile device acquisition and analysis, this is something as well that, again, has been around a while, but is phenomenally better in 8 than it has been. I also want to talk about App Central and EnScripts for those that aren't used to the EnCase platform. But getting into the features, the direct network preview is where I'm going to start here. And this is, acquiring data, obviously, key challenge in any forensic investigation. There's a lot of organizations that pre-deploy big organizations, Fortune 500s, et cetera, pre-deploy forensic agents like EnCase Basic. And for those that don't know, there's some rebranding done. I'm sure Tharp can talk more about this than I can here, but where what people used to call EnCase Enterprise is now EnCase Basic. Basically here, we use this a lot to facilitate collection data from endpoints, right? So the agents are pre-positioned, they're ready to go, everything's set up, and then at the time that you need to go scan, either do an IOC scan or come back in then and go pull data from an endpoint, whether that's a disk image or a memory image, or just simply preview files on the disk. Again, it's ready to go. They're all set there. You task it up on the safe, and it's good to go. The reality is that licensing costs and resource investments, even if the licenses were free, there's still a resource cost for deploying another agent onto a machine and also managing those agents and all that. Look, realistically, it just puts it out of the reach of smaller organizations. What I am really a fan of here, though, is that, basically with the EnCase, I can do one-to-one network preview without having to get into pre-installed agents. And I'm a big fan of the way that this direct network preview works, also for even larger organizations, because, as I was talking to some of my folks, over here at the Rendition, where we do a lot of this forensic work as well, and incident response work, we're kind of kicking around like, when was the last time that we used, basically we ran a whole case, even where we had, forensic agents pre-deployed, that we didn't actually have to go deploy something mid-case, right? When do we have 100% coverage? And everybody agreed we couldn't remember a time. And it turns out, we kind of kicked back then and said, okay, what's the root cause of that? And it turns out that, again, there are a lot of these Linux servers, and one of them recently was a voice over IP concentrator, and just, these weird report group servers that again may not have a managed agent on them. Well, that doesn't mean that I want to go do old school forensics where I want to go drop the box, power it off, clone the drive on a write blocker. If I can use just a network preview, and again, particularly if I don't have to get anybody involved in installing it, this is phenomenal. And the fact that this is built in, and if you've used EnCase Enterprise before, this one-to-one network preview is going to be an easy, very, very easy transition. Not surprisingly, the UIs look phenomenally similar, but it's really nice here that you've got that ability built in. It's licensed into the product, and again, this allows us to go in and go grab data for both the drive as well as the processes. Something that you may not be aware of too. This is another reason that I love these network previews, these live online previews, is that if you've got somebody that's using full disk encryption, and don't get me wrong, obviously EnCase can support encryption keys for a number of different products, but let's say that I've got somebody who's using full disk encryption. Let's say they're doing BitLocker. If I come in on a network preview and I've got the physical drive and the logical volume, I can avoid having to basically capture the physical drive and then go track the help desk down to get the device keys that they hopefully have. Look, I know they always should have them, but let's also be realistic. Murphy happens here. One of the things that I like about this is that if I come in and I go and image the logical volume versus the raw disk, then again, I should be getting, and in almost all cases, I'm going to get the decrypted volume, right? So that's one step less that I have to deal with there. That's just makes my analysis that much easier. Obviously, too, you shut the machine down, you don't get process memory. Excuse me. I like the fact that with EnCase, you can see both. With this EnCase, direct network preview, you can get both physical memory as well as individual process memory. That certainly helps. As well. And again, yes, there are some definite use cases for this, particularly as we get into incident response. So the second thing I want to talk about is mobile acquisition and analysis. My favorite piece about this, and this is what really kind of tipped the scales for me when it comes to mobile acquisition, piece here. Look, great that we can access and analyze, a tablet, smartphone, and actually some non-traditional devices, which I think Tharp's going to talk a little bit more about too. Things like a mobile GPS, for instance, right? So the idea here is that this is designed, I think, at least I vision it, to close a capability gap for organizations that just don't have the budget for a dedicated mobile forensics platform, right? Obviously, I've used other mobile forensics platforms. You know, they are geared 100% around mobile, and great. That's nice. But look, I like the fact that I can get everything onto one platform, right? Whether it's tablet, smartphone, laptop, etc. I've got all that put into one case, and I can do some correlation there and keyword searching inside of one case and data bookmark or evidence bookmarking. Again, that if I have to stretch this out across multiple platforms, which means again multiple case files, that correlation may not be as readily evident, or readily evident. Look, realistically here, the other thing that's big for me is the cloud data. You may have heard just in the last week that there was a renewed push out with Border Patrol or Customs and Border Protection, right? As they're you're moving back through the back through a customs checkpoint, they were actually talking about for searching a mobile phone. One of the things that they want to make sure that everybody's doing now is putting it in airplane mode before they perform the search, right? And I thought that was really interesting and very timely because not that's the first time we've heard this ruling, but it really underscores the amount of data that's not on the phone. Right. What they're looking for here with putting in an airplane mode is that there's a huge difference between what's on the phone if you do an actual acquisition on it, what's actually cached on the phone versus what's in the cloud. And one of the things that's unique about EnCase, is that it can actually go out and grab cloud data, which will again allow you to pull in that data just like the user would have it on the phone, versus just having what's actually cached on the phone itself. So EnCase Forensic supports collection from a number of different cloud services, from Facebook to Google Drive to Twitter, Google Locations, even Alexa. And I'd be interested to kind of kick this over to Tharp and kind of chat about, like for instance, well, I guess one of the questions that I would have right off the bat is, do I need the user's credentials for this, or how long are those normally, if they're stored on the phone, how long are those normally good for with EnCase, and maybe kind of talk about how did you guys select these services and maybe where you're going in the future?
Yes, absolutely. So Jake, essentially, like you said, the cloud acquisition works in two different ways. We've added actually iCloud acquisition along with the ones which are listed here. The way it works is if the user has ever installed iTunes as example or Gmail as example, usually it leaves behind the auth data file. And if the user is able to find that auth data file, essentially it makes easy to access the user's data because we no longer need the credentials unless they've enabled two-factor authentication or something else. But on the other hand, if you already have access to those details, it's very convenient to put in the user's credentials and be able to download data and make it offline. So that's essentially how the cloud data acquisition works. We're constantly looking at what else to add, and you'll be seeing quite a few items come up in the upcoming releases.
That's great. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
And I like the addition of iCloud. That's definitely capability, critical capability, right, for a lot of organizations.
Correct.
So this is the feature that I was kind of chatting about initially, and said this is one of these things that Pathways is kind of think about click to process. That's kind of where I'm at here, and this is something that EnCase version 8 supports. It basically helps us standardize evidence processing throughout an investigation. Now, I'll be honest, right? When I first saw this, Tharp and a couple other folks from OpenText are walking me through the product before I started my review on it and saying, hey, here's some features to be on the lookout for. And I saw this and I was kind of like, okay, neat. And I was totally underwhelmed. And I'll be honest, this is one of these things that I turned around 180 degrees on because, as I mentioned before, I'm big on standardizing processes. And this is where I picture this thing actually working at. There's two pathways that we have here that are included by default: full investigation and preview/triage. And basically, for each one of these, you just go in and click to run a particular, whether it's an analytic or EnScript or a piece of case processing. The idea here is that you can build and share these custom pathways Again, they can include these third-party EnScripts. The idea here, though, is this allows a senior analyst, and this is where I picture this being of the most use, although I have to clarify that even if you're a senior analyst, this is one of these spots, again, that I found myself coming back to a couple of times where it was like, hey, okay, how do I, oh, you know what? I could go launch this thing, or I've already got a click button for it set up in a pathway. I just went back and clicked the link, right? Back to the pathway and click the link. The pathways are very conspicuously defined in your tab. And to go to, basically to go to a pathway, you know, the currently or last active pathway, click the link. It's literally 2 clicks away from almost anywhere in the UI. So it was one of those, it was really, really convenient for me. And again, I love this idea of standardizing this workflow where it's literally, you know, click number 1, you know, examine, click number 2, examine, you know, on down the way here. And again, this is this huge repeatable workflow piece. And so again, if I'm a senior analyst and I've got some junior analysts on the team, I'm setting up a workflow. I'm ensuring consistent processing of evidence. And again, if you do a lot of this analysis, you know that a lot of forensics cases get devalued, yeah, I guess devalued is probably the right word there, where people just don't follow good evidence, both processing and analysis routines, right? And again, this standardizes this for us. I'm a big, big fan of this. You know, here's the full investigation pathway. And again, this one's already here by default. So I want you to picture for a minute that you've got a junior analyst who, you know, is just in there to literally just the case. They need to answer some questions like, for instance, let's say about email, who knew what when, right? So, you know, basically, did the user receive an email from, you know, Joe before such and such date? The beauty of this is literally they can go into pathways and click view emails. They can bookmark a few emails and then come back and click create a report and done, right? I mean, as soon as they've done the bookmarks, they've done they're literally done, right? So, and I'm not saying that's every case, obviously, but picture for a moment here, you know, this becomes one of our quick starts. And then the second piece is, you know, again, if I've got a set of things, let's say for evidence of execution, that I do every time incident case, you know, because I'm looking at the Trojan defense, that some other guy or gal did it, then I'm going to go ahead and put that in here inside of my pathways, so that my analysts, as they're going through, they're looking at the same thing that same things that I'm looking at. Right now, obviously, from an analysis standpoint, they're actually going to have to go in there and, you know, lay eyes on. But again, you know, if I can force that evidence to be processed, if I can make sure, I say force, but basically here on, you know, create click links, again, I'm putting it forward in their minds. And again, this is such a huge, I really can't overstate how big of a deal this is to me from an analysis standpoint to have this ready to go for my analysts. And again, that standardization of workflow piece, this is a spot where I see this being a force multiplier into the future for, honestly, for a lot of different use cases. And I'm sure that there are use cases. I'm harping a lot on the, you know, the senior analyst driving and standardizing workflows for junior analysts. I'm sure there's others that can be used here. Another one that I was thinking about was like military and law enforcement that are doing some of the document metadata exploitation. Right, you know, I'm thinking some like the counter-terror work and the, you know, again, you don't need to process the whole case there. You need to go find documents and extract metadata, right? You know, and I'm just like thinking about some of the, you know, these really wild use cases that again, this enables out here, you know, within inside of EnCase. And the great part too is that if you're using this for a triage type thing and you come back and find, and again, we're looking at the full investigation pathway, but there's also one for triage. And again, you can define your own customs. If somebody finds something in triage that needs further analysis, it's already in an EnCase. At this point, you're literally just handing it off to another investigator, to a more senior investigator. So again, I'm a big fan of this for a lot of different reasons. You know, I might actually kick this back over to Tharp and ask, you know, Tharp, what am I missing here on the pathway side? What are some other use cases that you're seeing customers use these for?
So there's quite a few ones, and we've seen like they will add specific areas of a processor to include, because they'll create specific use cases for a certain type of investigation, whether it's, you know, child exploitation or malware analysis, because not every piece of the processor needs to be done. So we've seen like people adding that separately. Along with that, one of the biggest things we're seeing is that senior analysts are setting up these workflows for newer analysts, usually, like you mentioned, depending on what type of indexing they want to do, maybe a specific language. So then they can specify as an add-on note saying that index in this specific language or that specific language. If you find data which is present, those kind of use case scenarios specifically you can drill into.
Yeah, that's the language thing is really smart. And, that's one that I hadn't thought of right off the bat. But as I'm thinking about this, I bet as you go through and set up the click links there, it's probably easier to set that up once if you know you're processing in a specific language than it is to go back and set it up again and again.
Exactly. And then, bigger organizations always want to ensure that there's consistency to the analysis, So they love this part because, essentially you're bringing order to chaos, and that's the idea. Can you simplify it and keep it consistent through your cases so you don't get different results every time?
Yeah, no, and like I said, I think we discussed this initially, a couple of months ago when we started this. This is one of these things again that it took me a few minutes to appreciate. Again, like I said before, when somebody first showed it to me, it's kind of wasn't really excited. But again, as I started working with it a little bit more, I saw the full power of it, and it just blew me away. So again, hats off to you. Great work on this.
Thank you.
Yep. So hey, EnScripts and App Central. If you haven't used EnCase before, or if you have used EnCase before, you're familiar with EnScripts. If you haven't, you should know that EnScripts basically is a program, or EnScript is a programming language. It lets the end user build new capabilities into basically into the EnCase platform. This is obviously huge for us because instead of having to go back in and submit a feature request and wait for a product build cycle to get that feature request fulfilled, EnScripts basically allow you, the user, or if it's not you, maybe some developer that you have on retainer or in your organization, to go build out new capabilities and add those to the platform. And then even if you don't have developers available, what's great about this is that because this feature has been made available to the community, there's this big community groundswell of folks that have built scripts together there and have published a lot of these. And there's a lot of places you can go for this. But of course, scripts are executable code, and there's that whole one of the things I end up dealing with a lot of our organizations that we work with for forensics is, what tools are you using and where do you get them? And if I say, well, I went and downloaded something from GitHub, I always get that whole like whose repository was it on GitHub, right? Is always a question. And so this is one of the reasons I love App Central. And because App Central is a repository of EnScripts that are developed by vetted developers in the community, meaning that while anybody can apply for an account, not everybody gets approved to go deploy scripts on App Central. And so what you're dealing with here is, at least, and by the way, too, a lot of the scripts on App Central are directly maintained by OpenText themselves. So that's a huge, the lineage of a lot of these scripts already. But again, the idea with an EnScript here, and particularly the ones at App Central, is that they're future-proofing your forensic tool investment. Now that any newly discovered or some kind of custom forensic artifact can be analyzed in the platform directly. One of the things that we had a couple of years ago, we were dealing with a particular case where this application, they had this custom telemetry application loaded enterprise-wide in these machines, and we found out that we could get a lot of process execution information from these telemetry logs. Not all of it, but a good amount of it. And as a result, we wrote an EnScript to go out and parse that out, because obviously no forensics tool on the planet has that, has that capability built in. It's a custom telemetry app, right? So as we're able to do this, again, we're putting all this information in the platform instead of running a third-party script. Granted, we could have written this in Python, certainly, and done this, but again, that takes the data out of our platform, right? One of the big benefits to EnScripts, again, is keeping everything in the platform, and again, keeping that write once, redeploy everywhere. Really, really enjoy this, and this is something, with App Central being able to pull stuff down is huge. One of the things that we looked for during the review, we were doing some analysis of evidence of execution because one of our systems did have some malware on it. And we downloaded EnScripts for prefetch and shim cache from App Central directly. So that was pretty slick. I actually did a search for Amcache as well. I couldn't find anything for Amcache, but the thing that was really cool was I was able to go find one from a reputable developer, not an App Central, a few minutes later. And so, it's one of those that, really showed me the power of, for shim cache and prefetch, I've got it out of a known trusted source, and for amcache, another artifact of execution, I was able to go download something a couple of minutes later, basically again from a fairly well-known developer in the community, right? And again, everything tying directly back into the EnCase platform. So again, if you haven't taken a look at this before, definitely EnScripts hugely expand the capabilities of EnCase. Again, I like the idea of centralizing a lot of these on this App Central. Makes them easy to deploy, and again, gives you some idea of the lineage of the script itself. But again, huge enabler for pulling more functionality into the platform. One of my favorite pieces when getting into incident investigations is this entropy analysis feature. This was absolutely killer for me. We talk about during incident investigations, for instance, we do Forensics 508, the big incident response course. It's big about how do you find that first hit. And often that can be one of our most challenging tasks, right? Particularly when I'm thinking about an incident investigation. Malware is often packed or compressed, and that means that it has higher entropy values than we typically see in benign software, right? So I'll also mention here that if I'm doing like an insider investigation or maybe a child exploitation case or whatever, I'm always looking for encrypted containers, right? Veracrypt, TrueCrypt, right? Whatever the case is here, if we've got one of those encrypted containers on the file system, it's going to be a large file and it's going to have high entropy, right? So the fact that we have the ability to go measure entropy inside of EnCase as part of the data processing or evidence processing is absolutely huge. Don't get me wrong, I love SHA-1 comparisons, I love MD5 comparisons, but that's looking for the knowns, right? Entropy helps me go look for the unknowns and find meaning in my unknowns specifically. So I was a big fan of this as well. This was big in discovering, and it actually found our malware during the analysis. In our tests, at least, found our malware, and it didn't highlight it as malware. It didn't say, hey, look at this, it's malware. What it did show was in my System32 directory, I had a few files that had ridiculously high entropy, and of those, I think 3 out of 5 were malware. Right, so two were just false positives, but again, if I'm looking at thousands of files in System32, bringing that down to 5 that I actually need to manually look at is pretty huge. So, I'm going to close out here and kind of hand this over to hand it over to Harp. Look, to close out my piece of this, I'll say that EnCase has been a solid performer, among digital forensics platforms. EnCase version 8 is not version 7. If the last time you saw it was version 7, give version 8 a look. The new features are obviously analyst driven. I think that's probably more than anything else that or probably one of my biggest takeaways as we got it and started working with EnCase version 8 is that it wasn't built by developers who thought they knew more than the analyst. It clearly had analyst feedback in it, right? People that have done forensics in the platform have obviously had a say in putting this together because the workflow just flowed, right? And I haven't been able to say that about some tools for quite some time. This definitely, the workflow just flowed. Loved it. The mobile device support was huge. The one-to-one network preview also huge. Again, I want to mention here too that if you're a small medium enterprise that doesn't have a huge budget for enterprise forensics, or you can't cost justify a standalone mobile forensics platform, these are yet other reasons to give EnCase a look because those are both solid offerings that are included in your licensing cost. Right? So look, with that, I'm going to kick this over to Harp. Harp, take it away, man. I can't wait to see what you guys have in store for future releases.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. Hello, my name is Harp Thukral, and I'm the product manager for EnCase Forensic. My role is to listen to your feedback and go back and see how we can take EnCase in the best direction forward. I would like to touch on just a few things before I jump in, especially to re-emphasize our commitment to forensic. If you're not aware, Guidance Software was acquired last year by OpenText. It has really been helpful as within the past 1 year, our team has grown and we have access to a lot more resources. Another thing which is really important for us is that we believe that we provide a comprehensive workflow with a combination of EnCase and Tableau product lines, which is very unique. Now, you heard a lot about version 8. But when we set out to design version 8 of EnCase, we really relied on your feedback and used this workflow as a guide. I want to go over it real quick just to give you an idea of what we were thinking, because different words can mean different things to people. So the first step which we thought about is triage. Now, EnCase allows you to examine in volatile data, including RAM, and assess for presence of encryption. This is enhanced by encryption support, obviously. Since the amount of data investigations is growing, this is also where triage is helpful. It allows you to rank and filter data, allowing you to collect the most relevant and important data for your investigation. The next step, which we believe should be, is collect. This is where you acquire the data in an efficient and secure manner in a code-accepted, formats like EX01, EO1, formats which we actually invented. The next step of the digital forensic workflow, which we thought was process. This is where the main core of the work happens, like decryption if the data is actually encrypted, hashing, file signature analysis, raw keyword searching, indexing, etc. I want to touch quickly. The strength of EnCase is that you can go directly to investigate if you like, and you can skip any process in between. So that's the real beauty of EnCase. Now that the processing is done, it's time to deep dive and do a forensic investigation using the result sets from processing. So you can bookmark, tag, view images, etc., and really build your case. After that, I think it's really important that you're able to collaborate. So maybe you want to send your data to your attorney or another investigator. EnCase really offers you the most comprehensive reviewing capabilities out there. Finally, reporting. You need to create customized, comprehensive, detailed reports of wide varieties, and you want to make sure that it's targeted towards different target audiences. We have the various options to allow you to report those as needed. Next thing I want to talk about is this is the detailed view of our forensic product portfolio. We have three main product lines, like you heard. You have the EnCase Forensic, we have the EnCase Mobile Investigator, and we have the Tableau Forensic Hardware. Using these three product lines, we believe we cover the entire digital forensic workflow, which I explained in the previous screen. So what are the other value adds which we provide? One of them, I think, is training. It's the most important pillar we have, and we excel at that. We have an industry-recognized NCE, NCEP, CFSR certifications, and 16 courses. Along with that, we have other value adds, such as EnCase Processor. It's the ability to spin off multiple processes, so you can use those additional workstations which are actually sitting there and catching dust. And finally, we have EnCase App Central, like Jake explained. A lot of great EnScripts out there, which are of real value. And I know Jake talked quite a bit about pathways, but the ability to add custom EnScripts to your pathway is amazing. So, let me give you an example. The other day, we started looking into a new registry artifact for executed programs. We researched artifact and we tested EnCase parsing, and it worked really well. So we fed that data to one of our internal training persons. His name is Simon Key. You probably know him. He coded that EnScript within 24 hours, and we used it in the next day, and we were able to use it. Another example is Windows. The latest version of Windows was released something new called as BAM. It's called Background Activity Monitor. Guess what? We coded that, and we have an EnScript available for that. So there is immense value when it comes to EnCase App Central and the ability to extend EnCase than its usual power. Another thing is our licensing options. So we provide pretty much every licensing option as they're listed: perpetual, term, site license, academic program. I want to talk a little bit about Tableau as to how that comes into play. They really play a critical role in our collection and triage capability. This includes our brand new TX1, which is all-in-one investigation platform really by itself, along with the forensic bridges, the imagers, the duplicators, the write blockers, and accessories like PCIe and PCI, an example of those. Want to jump into the little bit more about the core file systems and artifacts which we support. We really give you the widest range of those for parsing, snapshot, volatile memory. As you can see, from Windows, Linux, macOS, Android, iOS, Raspberry Pi, which is really a Linux variant, We pretty much support it all, and you can see a nice little chart as to what this looks like. When it comes to encryption, Jake already mentioned we do support a lot of encryptions, and this is a list of some of them, from Checkpoint to BitLocker, Semantic, PGP, a bunch of them out there. I want to switch gears a little bit. Now, the review which was done by Jake was done on 8.06 version of EnCase. Since then, we delivered in April of this year version 8.07, which has added quite a bit more value. And I want to tell you a little bit more about that. One of the things which we delivered with 8.07 is APFS support. This is Apple's latest file system release with High Sierra macOS version 10.3. It's quite different. We support almost all features of APS, some of which are listed here, the exception being encryption, which we're working on currently and will be adding support in the upcoming releases of EnCase. Next thing we also released is volume shadow copy. Now, volume shadow copy has been a part of EnCase for a long time via EnScript. We took that and redesigned it from the ground up and made it part of core EnCase. Volume shadow copy is like snapshots, which are taken by Windows. They can help investigators uncover deleted and modified files. The use case is user says they do not have certain files, having access to volume shadow copy data can show otherwise and help build your case. Examples of type of investigations you've seen these used in are like child exploitation cases, intellectual property investigation, malware analysis, anywhere you would like to see how the files have changed or been deleted. The way the solution works is that after you've added your evidence into EnCase, you would navigate to tools, analyze volume shadow copies. At that point, you would see the snapshots which are available, and you can select one or multiple, and you have two options. You can say, you know what, create a full restore, meaning you want to recreate the hard drive as it existed at that point when the snapshot was taken entirely, and you're rebuilding that hard drive at that point, or that evidence at that point. The next option is, you know what, you could say, just give me the differential data, a differential meaning deleted and modified data. That's what really interests me. Now, if you select that option, you can go one step forward and use those existing conditions which you defined. What that would do is it will let you select specific, let's say you just want to see videos and images which were deleted or modified. So that's great. You can get that. Or you could say, you know what, just give me all documents, PDFs, doc files, XLS example. And you can create those conditions, and it's going to filter out from that snapshot of the modified and deleted files and give you that. At the end of the day, what's going to happen is it's going to create another piece of evidence which you can output to your drive, or pull it into your EnCase and parse it like any other piece of evidence. So that's where volume shadow copy comes in play. I want to emphasize this is a great example of how we are trying to integrate with examiners and listen to you guys, because you know, we looked at it and there was an EnScript, and we get constant feedback saying, well, this looks great. Why can't we make it part of core EnCase? So we incorporate that. That's why EnScripts are so important to us. Along with that, we delivered a bunch of encryption updates, you know, like we added support for BitLocker Windows 10 XT SAES, semantic hold disencryption, Dell data protection. We did add a lot of mobile stuff, like for example, now you can parse encrypted iOS backups, Excel reports, parse through dual SIM cards, iOS 11 device backups, GTAC bin, and a bunch of apps. I already talked about the iCloud backup support, which we have added for acquisition previously when talking to Jake. But along with that, we added support for larger hard drives and about 50 plus customer issues fixed. The reason I say that is our concentration is to get feedback from you and see what is important to you as examiners and analysts, and take that and build the next version of EnCase. And that's my ultimate goal here. That's all I have. I think we're ready for question and answers.
All right, well, thank you for that great presentation. We do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question is, remote acquisition is also supported in case of corporate mobile device having MDM mobile iron installed? They kind of end that on a question.
So Are you saying that MDM is installed and we are trying to get that data in? It depends on what format the MDM application actually drops the data in. If it's just simple files, or it can output a EO1 or a logical image file, we can definitely ingest that.
All right, thanks. The next one is also a statement kind of phrased as a question. A corporate endpoint is on home Wi-Fi. Direct Preview can work to perform acquisition in this scenario?
Yes, I believe so. As long as they can hit the IP address and they can connect, they should be able to use Direct Network Preview to get that data.
All right, thanks. Can either of you touch on your products that offer the ability to perform triage acquisition on remote devices when the analyst is not on site or on the same network? And are these good options for small firms?
That's a great question. So yes, you could do that, and this is where our endpoint investigator or EnCase Basic, like Jake said, comes into play. We have the ability to deploy an agent. The agent is essentially able to capture a snapshot, live memory, volatile data, bring all that stuff back to the examiner's machine or even to a off-site location, maybe a network share, especially with GDPR coming into play, and then be able to remote and then actually use the examiner to do the investigation like you would do any other forensic investigation.
All right, thanks. This next one's for Jake. How do you see pathways extending the digital forensic workflow? Can you give us some use ideas?
Yeah, one of them that I was thinking about, I was thinking about the military document exploitation, right? Excuse me. There are some other law enforcement folks that kind of get into something, similar. Excuse me, sorry. Excuse me, with that. Some folks get into some stuff that's a little bit similar, but so picture for a moment that you've got access to a machine or access to a hard drive for a very limited period of time, say maybe an hour or something, while maybe somebody's in questioning. And let's say that you would set up a pathway that would say, hey, go scan for all document files, extract metadata from all document files, write a report. You could have that report, in front of the investigator potentially, depending on, of course, the size of the machine, but in front of an investigator in a matter of, minutes, right? I'm picturing like sub 30 minutes in a lot of cases there. So, as opposed to going through and saying, okay, follow this process versus click these links. It's just a huge, huge benefit there. And the other thing that I'll mention there too is that isn't going to necessarily require indexing. I would say that would be one use case I can see. The other one that I can see is processing breach, basically breach cases. If I'm looking for, let's say in one of our standard breach analyses, we're looking for a number of different things, all of which we can process through EnScript. And again, I can put that into my pathways there. I'm going to obviously carve for prefetch. I'm obviously going to parse any prefetch that we find. I'm going to look at any shim cache data in the registry. If AM cache is present, we're going to do that recent file cache as well. And then any event logs that we have, provided that we've got process tracking enabled. So, that's all stuff that I want to parse out every time, and I want that immediately available to my investigators. And so, while I know everybody eventually goes to look at all that stuff, a lot of times people anchor on the IOCs that they have versus the, actually going through and looking at all the unknowns. So that's one of the spots where I feel like I'm going to be able to keep my investigators on track better is by using that, using a pathway and setting up that process ahead of time.
Yeah, I just want to add that to that. I'd say we are always looking for other ways to expand pathways as needed for investigators. So if the audience has any ideas or anything specific they would like to see, I would love to hear that, because that's my goal. If I can take it and make it better, then that's everything I need.
All right, thank you both. Harp, in relation to the question that was before this, they said, can either of you touch on your products, and are these good options for small firms? The questioner followed up with, I was thinking to a USB device.
So are you saying like acquisition of a USB device? I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understand. I'm guessing that they're saying that when you're doing a remote acquisition and a USB drive device is attached to that device, can we look at that data? That would be correct. If it's attached to the endpoint and we can access that, the agent would actually be able to read it and bring it back for further investigation.
All right, thanks. We'll see if they need any more clarification. In the meantime, we'll move on to the next question. Harp, what are your plans with EnScript? How often are they updated?
Great question. So, as I kind of gave you two examples of how often we update EnScripts, we have a lot of developer licenses out there and people who are constantly updating those EnScripts. We go through a review process to make sure it won't break EnCase. But overall, what we do is we take the request if nobody else wants to write it, and we'll have somebody like Simon write the EnScripts. But more importantly, it's constantly updated as we go on. And the plans for, really is what do we do, and when we have a training, we kind of identify any updates and tell them, hey, you know what, this is what's changed. This is what they are made out of. And obviously the description shows that. So overall, where I want to take EnScript is I would like to extend it to Python. So like one of the key goals we also have is we're probably going to take that EnScript and augment it with Python. So if you have those existing Python scripts, now suddenly EnScript will be able to consume those and take that functionality and add it to EnCase.
All right, thank you. How about acquisition for Mac?
So today, acquisition with Mac, our options which we have is, we use something, our Tableau hardware, obviously. They're able to acquire every single piece of Mac out there from Fusion drives to the latest OS, and we're able to create those and bring them into EnCase. The other tools, right now, our acquisition engine doesn't run on Mac, so we can acquire that. We do have EnCase Portable, which is able to do that. You can boot it in and be able to acquire that. So that's an option we have.
Thanks, Harp. Let's see here. Can you explain how Direct Network Preview compares with EnCase Enterprise?
So Direct Network Preview essentially is a one-to-one existing computer network acquisition, whereas Enterprise or Endpoint Investigator really is more of how do I deploy an agent actually and be able to send commands from the examiner and say, you know what, go acquire that. So the Endpoint Investigation essentially can sweep the network of computers with agents on them already deployed. Whereas, the Direct Network Preview is more of a one-to-one acquisition.
All right, so we have some clarification on that question asked earlier. He says, my question is more along the lines of, is there a method to create a pre-configured script or something else that defines what I want to acquire ahead of time and copies that data to USB? But without an agent in place ahead of time, the idea is that I want a non-technical user to be able to connect a USB, click a file, and perform acquisition.
Okay, I do understand the question now. So yes, you can. The way to do it is we have EnCase Portable, which we offer, and it's free with EnCase. And all you do is you can create jobs with modules, and you can specify which specific collection you want to do, specific areas, and you can collect RAM and bring them all back into EnCase. So like, collect RAM, volatile data, etc.
All right, he says thanks. Why is using entropy analysis preferable to using hash libraries? When should I use one versus the other?
Heck, I'll take this. This is Jake. Hey, so look, if I'm using a hash library, I'm looking for a known good or a known bad. you know, it's a file that I know about, right? So that's great, and it works well for eliminating. Usually when I'm using hashes, I'm usually, in most of my cases, I'm looking for basically eliminating the known goods, right? You know, as far as the entropy analysis goes, what I'm looking for are outliers. It's rare that I have files that have very, very high entropy. Executable files, if you open in a hex editor, to you and me, they look random, but they're not mathematically random. And so we can go through and look for entropy scores, particularly in directories that should hold things that are executable files, like the system32 directory. I can go in there and I can see, you know, when there's a file in there that is an executable, but doesn't meet normal executable patterns just based on the randomness. And again, you know, I'll mention too that if I'm looking for an encrypted container someplace, that's a, encrypted container, like an encrypted file system, a Veracrypt or whatever. It's going to have very, very high entropy and a relatively large file size, and probably isn't going to be named with a .zip or a .7z or whatever, right? So those files, by the way, also have very, very high entropy. So, you know, I guess it kind of depends on my use case. It's am I looking for an unknown? If I'm looking for an unknown outlier, then I'm going to use entropy analysis. If I'm looking for a you know, looking for a known good or a known bad, that's when we're going to use hash libraries. But I like the power of having both. And by the way, I'll throw out one more there as well. You know, occasionally we see things that are mislabeled entirely, you know, where it's supposed to be a JPEG, but it's not really a JPEG or a docx or whatever. You know, the JPEGs and docx files are definitely going to be relatively high entropy as well. And so, you know, if I see one of those that has a low entropy, that would also be something that would key me in on, hey, this thing is not what it seems, or I need to take a closer look at that, right? So again, it's an anomaly detector versus a known good or known bad detector. Yeah, I guess that does that answer the question well? Or Harp, do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I just say absolutely what you said is true. The only other thing is, you know, if you have packed or compressed files, which are common for hackers to do, you know, especially because they do executables, they might have a higher randomization, which may, you know, which might show as an outlier with entropy versus hashes.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And that's kind of where I was going before. You know, we did our analysis. Like I said, I think there were 5 files that stood out in the system32 directory, you know, in our test, and I think 3 of them were malware, if I remember correctly. It was a high signal to noise ratio, and it was stuff that we wouldn't have found with, you know, again, given our hash libraries.
All right, well, that's all we have for today. Do either of you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say something here real quick before we close. I'm blown away with the addition of the volume shadow copy stuff. That's something that I've been hearing, you know, be in the next release for a couple of years now. Glad to see it's finally there. And you know, to that point, you know, volume shadow copy, as Harp mentioned, has been supported through EnScript for a long time. It's a matter of, you know, a lot of folks have wanted it, you know, pulled into the core product, and this, seeing that honestly is a huge. I would say is a commitment to quality, I guess, or you know, a very tangible commitment to quality and commitment to moving forward. And I think that's kind of the thing you can expect moving forward too, as you look at the EnScripts is more of that transition. But I'll let Harp speak to that, obviously. But Harp, man, you know, really happy to see the product and happy to see that, you know, even since I tested it, it's continued to make strides. So that's great to hear. Thanks for all your good work over there.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. I wish I could say I did it all by myself, but that would be false. It's the entire team, and we are all dedicated. And I just want to emphasize, you know, that the positive things that have changed, and we are listening for any direction on how to shape EnCase for you guys. Because really, it's your product more than ours. You guys spend on it day and night versus us. We look at it for, you know, 8 hours and then we go home. Whereas we know you as investigators are probably spending a lot more time. So we are always listening and we are always open to feedback, whether it's positive or negative.
All right,
awesome,
well,
man. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jake and Harp, for your great presentation, and to OpenText for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.